The Quiet Echo of Clementine. Synopsis: Arthur Finch, a man in his early 60s, has built a life of quiet routine in his charming, albeit somewhat predictable, coastal town. A widower for over a decade, his days are filled with solitary walks, tending to his garden and the comforting rhythm of his local bookstore. His world, however, is subtly, irrevocably altered by the presence of Clementine, the vibrant, effortlessly kind owner of the town's small art gallery. For Arthur, Clementine is a splash of unexpected color in his muted landscape, a melody he hadn't realized he was missing. But Clementine is happily married, her life a tapestry woven with threads Arthur can only admire from a distance. The Quiet Echo of Clementine delves into the tender, often painful, landscape of unrequited love in later life. The silent longing, the bittersweet joy of proximity, and a profound journey of acceptance when the heart desires what it cannot have. Chapter 1. The Weight of a Well-Worn Path. Arthur Finch knew the precise number of cracks in the pavement leading from his cottage to the town square. 62. He'd counted them on a particularly restless Tuesday morning, a decade after Eleanor had passed. It wasn't a morbid count, just a habit, a way to anchor himself in the predictable world he'd meticulously rebuilt. His cottage, a sturdy stone structure with a perpetually blooming rose bush by the door, hummed with the quietude of a life lived alone. He was 63 now, his hair distinguished silver, his hands gnarled from years of gardening, and before that, the meticulous work of an architect. Retirement had settled over him like a comfortable, if sometimes heavy, blanket. His days unfolded with the gentle predictability of the tides. Morning tea, a walk to the bakery for a still warm croissant, an hour or two in the garden, then perhaps a visit to Mrs. Gable's bookstore, where the scent of old paper was a balm. Today, however, his usual route felt different, charged with an invisible current. It was Tuesday, which meant Clementine's gallery, the azure palette, would be open. He wouldn't admit it, not even to the silent portrait of Eleanor on his mantelpiece, but his Tuesdays had subtly shifted their axis to orbit Clementine. He saw her through the wide glass window of the gallery before he even reached the door. She was arranging a new display, a collection of abstract seascapes, her movements fluid and graceful. Her hair, a riot of auburn curls, was pulled back loosely and a smudge of paint adorned her cheek. She laughed at something the customer said, a sound like wind chimes, and Arthur felt a familiar, gentle ache in his chest. Clementine. Her name was a burst of sunshine, a counterpoint to the muted tones of his own existence. She was perhaps a decade younger than him, vibrant and full of an infectious enthusiasm for art and life. Her eyes, the color of warm honey, seemed to hold a perpetual spark of curiosity. She was married, of course. He knew her husband, Thomas, a jovial, bear-like man who ran the local boat repair shop. They were, by all appearances, perfectly, wonderfully happy. Arthur pushed open the gallery door, the small bell above it jingling softly. Clementine looked up, her smile immediate and genuine. "Arthur, good morning. Just in time to give your esteemed opinion on these new pieces." "Good morning, Clementine," he replied, his voice a little gruffer than he intended. He cleared his throat. "They're certainly vibrant." He gravitated towards a piece depicting a stormy sea, its colors tumultuous and raw. It mirrored, in a strange way, the quiet tempest within him. "This one's my favorite," she said, come and stand beside him, her arm brushing his. A jolt, subtle but undeniable, went through him. He kept his gaze fixed on the painting, acutely aware of her proximity. The artist captured the wildness, didn't she? The untamed spirit of the ocean. "Indeed," Arthur murmured, his throat tight. He wanted to reach out, to smooth the paint smudge from her cheek, to tell her how her presence brightened his otherwise predictable days. But he didn't. He couldn't. His feelings for Clementine were a carefully guarded secret, a tender, fragile thing he nurtured in the quiet corners of his heart. To voice them would be to shatter the delicate friendship they shared, to invite awkwardness and pity where there was currently only warmth. He spent another 20 minutes in the gallery, discussing brushstrokes and color palettes, listening to Clementine's passionate explanations. He bought a small print, a tranquil depiction of a lighthouse, not because he particularly loved it, but because it gave him an excuse to linger, to engage with her, to absorb a little more of her light. As he stepped back out onto the pavement, the bell jingling behind him, the cracks in the sidewalk seemed less significant. His path was still well-worn, but now it carried the faint, sweet echo of Clementine. Chapter 2, a tapestry of shared moments. Arthur's unrequited affection for Clementine wasn't a sudden, blinding flash, but rather a slow, deliberate bloom, like a night blooming cereus unfurling its petals under the cover of darkness. It had begun subtly, woven into the fabric of their small-town life. He first truly noticed her 2 years ago, when she'd moved into the old storefront on High Street and transformed it into the Azure Palette. Before that, she was just a new face, a young woman with bright eyes. But then he started seeing her more often. She'd stopped by Mrs. Gable's bookstore, where Arthur often found himself browsing the history section. They'd exchanged polite nods, then brief comments about a new release or the weather. One blustery afternoon, a sudden downpour caught them both outside the bakery. Arthur, ever prepared, offered her the shelter of his large, sensible umbrella. They walked together for a block, the rain drumming a rhythm on the taut fabric above them. She talked about her plans of gallery, her dreams of bringing more contemporary art to the sleepy town. He found himself listening intently, captivated by her passion. She didn't talk at him, but with him, asking his opinions, genuinely interested in his quiet observations. "You have a good eye, Arthur," she'd said that day, surprising him. "You see the nuances." That simple compliment had lodged itself in his memory, a warm ember. Eleanor had always praised his practicality, his steadfastness. Clementine saw something else, something he hadn't known was visible. Their interactions grew. He became a regular at her gallery openings, standing quietly in the background, nursing a glass of cheap white wine, simply observing her. He loved watching her interact with people. Her easy laugh, the way she animatedly described a piece, her genuine delight when someone connected with the art. He'd offer small, practical advice about the gallery space, drawing on his architectural background, and she'd listen, sometimes even implementing his suggestions. "Arthur, you're a lifesaver with that lighting idea," she'd exclaimed once, her eyes sparkling. "It makes all the difference." These small moments, these shared smiles and brief conversations, became the threads of his growing affection. He learned about her love for strong coffee, her habit of humming off-key when she was concentrating, her quiet generosity towards struggling local artists. He knew she volunteered at the animal shelter on weekends and that she had a particular fondness for rescue dogs. He gathered these details like precious stones, polishing them in his mind. He knew about Thomas, too. Thomas, with his booming laugh and hand perpetually stained with grease from boat engines. Thomas, who would often drop by the gallery with a thermos of tea for Clementine, his arm casually slung around her waist as they chatted. Arthur would watch them, a pang in his chest that was part envy, part a strange, pure joy for Clementine's happiness. He never wished Thomas ill. He simply wished he was Thomas. His love for Clementine was not possessive or demanding. It was a quiet admiration, a deep well of affection that asked for nothing in return, save for the continued privilege of her presence in his life. He knew it was unrequited, and he accepted that. He had to. To do otherwise would be to risk everything, to shatter the fragile peace he'd found. Sometimes, in the quiet of his cottage, he would imagine a different life, a life where he met Clementine first, where he was the one to make her laugh, to share her dreams. He'd picture her sitting across from him at his kitchen table, the morning light catching the auburn in her hair. But these were fleeting fantasies, quickly reeled back in. Reality was a gentler, more painful thing. He was content, or so he told himself, with the periphery, with being the reliable friend, the quiet admirer. It was enough, he reasoned, to witness her joy, to be warmed by her light, even if that light was never truly meant for him. Chapter 3, The Silent Confession. The annual Summer Arts Festival was a highlight of the town's calendar, and Clementine, naturally, was at its heart. Her gallery hosted the main exhibition, and she bustled about, a whirlwind of energy and grace, directing artists, greeting visitors, and ensuring every detail was perfect. Arthur found himself drawn to the gallery on the festival's opening evening. The air hummed with conversation, and the faint scent of canvas and paint. He saw Clementine across the crowded room, her face flushed with excitement, her eyes alight as she spoke to a group of patrons. Thomas was by her side, his arm around her, beaming proudly. Arthur felt a familiar tightening in his chest. It wasn't jealousy, not exactly. It was a profound, quiet sorrow for what could never be. He watched them, a perfect tableau of shared happiness, and knew, with a certainty that chilled him, that his place was outside that frame. He moved through the exhibition, nodding to acquaintances, feigning interest in the art. His gaze kept drifting back to Clementine. She caught his eye, offered a quick, warm smile, and waved him over. "Arthur, you made it," she said, her voice bright over the din. "What do you think of the collection this year?" "It's splendid, Clementine," he said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his heart. "Truly, you've outdone yourself." "Oh, it's not just me," she demurred, though her eyes shone with pleasure. "It's the artists, the community. Everyone pulls together." She then introduced him to a visiting artist, and Arthur found himself drawn into a conversation about the nuances of light in landscape painting. Later, as the crowd began to thin, Clementine found him by a large window, looking out the twilight descending over the harbor. "Still here, Arthur?" she asked, her voice softer now, tinged with weariness that made him want to offer her a comfortable chair and a warm cup of tea. "Just enjoying the quiet," he replied, turning to face her. The gallery was almost empty, the last few stragglers making their way out. Thomas had stepped out to take a call. Clementine sighed, a small, tired sound. "It's been a long day, but a good one." She leaned against the window frame, her gaze following the last slivers of sunlight on the water. "Sometimes, I just want to sit and look at something beautiful, without having to explain it." Arthur felt a sudden, overwhelming urge. An urge to confess, to lay bare the quiet devotion he held for her. It was a foolish impulse, he knew, born of the fading light and the intimacy of the moment. But the words, or rather, the feeling welled up inside him, too strong to be entirely suppressed. "You are beautiful, Clementine," he said, his voice barely a whisper, his gaze fixed on her profile against the darkening sky. He hadn't meant to say it quite like that. It was meant to be a thought, a silent acknowledgement, but it had escaped. Clementine turned, her honey-colored eyes widening slightly. A faint blush rose on her cheeks. She looked at him, not with surprise or discomfort, but with a gentle, almost tender understanding. For a long moment, silence hung between them, thick with unspoken truths. Then she smiled, a soft, knowing smile that held no hint of mockery or pity. "Thank you, Arthur," she said, her voice equally soft. "That's a very kind thing to say." She reached out, and for a fleeting second, her hand rested gently on his arm. "You're a very kind man." The touch was brief, innocent, yet it sent a tremor through him. It was a touch of friendship, of affection, but not of love. And in that moment, Arthur understood. She had heard him. She had understood the unspoken confession in his words, the depth of his feeling, and she had, with exquisite grace, acknowledged it without acknowledging the possibility of reciprocation. She had accepted his compliment, and in doing so, had gently, kindly closed the door. Thomas re-entered the gallery then, his phone tucked into his pocket. "Ready to head home, love?" he asked Clementine, his arm going around her shoulders. "Ready, darling," she replied, her smile for Thomas as bright and genuine as ever. She glanced back at Arthur, a final, warm smile. "Good night, Arthur. Thank you for coming." "Good night, Clementine," he said, the words feeling like dust in his mouth. He walked home under the nascent stars, the 62 cracks in the pavement feeling heavier than usual. The silent confession had been made, and it had been met not with rejection, but with a gentle, undeniable understanding. It was a bittersweet release. The quiet echo of Clementine would always be there, but now he knew it was an echo he would carry alone. And perhaps, in that quiet acceptance, there was a different kind of peace to be found. Chapter 4, The Art of Letting Go. The weeks following the Summer Arts Festival settled into a new, quieter rhythm for Arthur. The unspoken exchange with Clementine hadn't shattered their friendship, as he had feared. Instead, it had subtly redefined it. She was still warm, still friendly, still asked for his opinion on new art pieces. But a certain tension, a hopeful undercurrent that he hadn't realized he carried, had dissipated. He still visited the Azure Palette, but less frequently and with a different purpose. He went to appreciate the art, to chat with Mrs. Gable about the latest literary releases, to simply be a part of the town's gentle hum. He no longer sought out Clementine's presence with the same desperate yearning. The ache in his chest was still there, a phantom limb of longing, but it was duller now, more manageable. One crisp autumn morning, Arthur found himself in his garden, pruning the rose bush by his door. The leaves were turning, a riot of reds and golds, and a cool breeze carried the scent of damp earth. He thought of Eleanor, as he often did, her practical wisdom, her unwavering love. He realized with a pang of clarity that he had loved her fully, openly, and that love had been returned. It was a different kind of love than what he felt for Clementine, a quiet, comfortable companionship that had deepened with every shared year. His love for Clementine was a different beast entirely. It was a yearning for something bright and effervescent, a desire to be seen and invigorated in a way he hadn't experienced in years. And while it was unrequited, it wasn't without its gifts. It had woken something within him, a capacity for feeling he thought had withered. It had reminded him that his heart, even at 63, was still capable of expansion, a profound admiration. He heard footsteps on the gravel path and looked up to see Clementine approaching, a small, potted plant in her hands. "Arthur," she said, her smile as genuine as ever, "I was just passing by and saw your beautiful roses. I picked this up at the nursery. Thought it might complement your collection." It was a small, vibrant fuchsia, its delicate blooms a striking contrast to the fading roses. "Clementine, that's very thoughtful of you," he said, genuinely touched. He took the plant from her, his fingers brushing hers. There was no jolt this time, just a comfortable warmth. "How have you been?" she asked, her gaze lingering on his garden. "Everything well?" "Very well," he replied, "just enjoying the change of seasons. And you? Busy with the gallery?" They chatted for a few minutes about the changing light, the upcoming holiday season, a new artist Clementine was excited about. It was easy, comfortable conversation, the kind between two friends who respected each other. As she turned to leave, Clementine paused. "You know, Arthur," she said, her voice soft, "you always bring a certain calm to the gallery, a groundedness. I appreciate that." Arthur looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw not the object of his desperate longing, but a kind, vibrant woman who valued his friendship. He smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. "And you, Clementine," he said, "you bring light." She smiled back, a warm, knowing smile, and then waved as she walked away, her auburn curls bouncing with each step. Arthur watched her go, the fuchsia plant cradled in his hands. The quiet echo of Clementine was still there, but it was no longer a lament. It was a gentle hum, a reminder of beauty, of connection, and a profound, quiet journey of a heart that had learned to love, to let go, and to find peace in the art of acceptance. He would plant the fuchsia, a vibrant splash of color, a testament to the unexpected blooms that life, even in its later chapters, could still bring.